You'll hear Tom McGinnis end the call tonight at 8 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And, Tom, welcome back to the show. That game there, you probably, I don't know how much you remember about the last time the Sixers won a game in Toronto.
Well, I remember the series. I don't remember specifically the game, although I looked over a little bit. But I do remember going there and how loud it was, and Allen and Vince Carter, and how it ended in Game 7 at our place. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't remember specifically the game we won there. I know each team won on each other's floor, which is conceivable in this series as well. But, yeah, it's been a long 18 years, and it's exciting to be back.
Yeah, and I know that the Sixers have not fared very well against this team in a while here. But, you know, you start to see some things in game number 2. They made a bunch of adjustments in that series where all of a sudden you felt like, oh, man, if Embiid plays this kind of defense, Siakam just didn't shoot the ball as well, and Ben played really good defense. It seemed that defense was something that the team really bought into. I mean, we saw many nights where you call games and they're giving up 120 in the rotations, and you're thinking, man, are they going to be able to play playoff-level defense? Did Game 5 against the Nets and Game 2 against the Raptors kind of clear that up for people?
Well, I hope so, but you need to do it 3 more times in this series, and you're right. That's how you win in the postseason. And, you know, Jim O'Brien is now heading up the defense once Billy Lang left and went to St. Joseph's. And so I think he deserves a little bit of the credit. I don't know that the reasoning, the consortium, if you will, that came up with those adjustments, I'm sure it was by committee with Coach Brown. But that was a bold move, putting Tobias Harris on Gasol, which I think we'll see again here tonight, and Joel on his countryman, Siakam. And I thought for Siakam, in the end now, he had 21 points. He took a lot of shots, 25 to get there. And I thought he was a little hesitant. It definitely threw him off. Now, tonight, it might not. Now, he might be used to it a little bit. He might have a little bit of methodology on how to attack Joel Embiid. And that's what's intriguing about a playoff series, and the moves, the counter moves. And, you know, it's interesting, Mike, and I'm going to ask this to Coach in a little bit. But I remember when Doc Rivers was the Celtics coach, and my late friend Flip Saunders must have been in TV between jobs, and he was at one of our playoff games. And I was like, Flip, what's up? And Doc Rivers hired him to, like, scout the Celtics and what he would do against Boston, like their own inside intelligence. And Nick Nurse, their coach, mentioned that the other night before the game. And I got to think that the Sixers, you know, they're trying to be a move ahead too. So, you know, they made the moves, and now how will Toronto react? And that's what I'm saying. So it's almost like scouting the scouting.
Yeah.
You can get your head twisted a little around when you're talking about adjustments, counter adjustments, and whatnot. But that's the intriguing part when you play the same team 7 times over the course of 2 weeks.
Yeah, and one thing I was mentioning earlier is, you know, Nurse, they got the better of game 1. Brown made adjustments. But it's almost as if you're coming home and you had 2 days of rest here. If you're Brett Brown, it's almost interesting to find out if he makes a completely different adjustment after the Raptors think they're adjusting to what the Sixers did. And if the Sixers show them something completely different, you know, that would be a rabbit to pull out of the hat there if they do that tonight. Or do they just stick with what got them the win in Game 2? That's what makes this so interesting.
Well, like I said, you get your head twisted around a little bit with moves and counter moves. But no, and again, because I listened to both coaches' press conferences, and, you know, again, you're learning basketball from these bright minds that delve into it so deeply. It's pretty interesting. I love that. And that's one of the things he said after the first game is even though you win the game, there are certain areas where you can still make adjustments. And so kind of to your point, Mike, like, you know, like I don't think the Sixers are going to stand pat and here's the formula. We're going to run it till, you know, for the next 5 games. That probably wouldn't be successful either. So, you know, there's going to be some tweaks. And, you know, here's the thing. Like I don't expect Serge Ibaka and Powell and Van Fleet. You know, the first game Ibaka had like 5 or, you know, like those guys haven't contributed at all. That was one of the things going into the series that scared you a little bit, their versatility and their depth. And it's the Sixers that have kind of come up with that in this series. And one other thing, and it's a name your listeners may not even be familiar with, but that is during the trade with Gasol and Memphis, you know, they gave up a player named DeLon Wright. He happened to be the brother of Darrell Wright, but he's an athletic wing player who could make a three, and he was part of that contingent off their bench that they lost. I'm sure that Masai didn't want to have to give him up, but that's what you got to do when you get an all-star in Gasol. So that's one of the little things that they lost in that depth and versatility. But yeah, Danny Green was second this year behind Joe Harris with 45% made threes. And he hasn't been a factor. If I had wood in this car, I'd knock on wood. But that's what I'm saying. Like, one of the intriguing things, one of the fun things about the playoffs is that a hero can be created in a moment's notice, and it's somebody we're not even thinking about, i.e. James Ennis in the first two games.
Well, you mentioned a hero, and it was Jimmy Butler the other night. Now, I was at a game back in 2014. He scored 53 against the Sixers with the Bulls. The Sixers are up big. He brings it to overtime. He scores 53 in that game. You probably remember it. He was amazing in that game.
Yes, I do, Mike. Yes, I do.
Now, but here's what you might not remember. He only scored 4 the next night. So he has a history of having these big games, and then I'm not saying he disappears. He just doesn't have the same level of game. But do the Sixers need him to have that kind of game? In other words, like Ben Simmons, it almost seems like they're saying, focus on play and defense. Whatever you give us offensively is gravy. But Jimmy Butler, does he have to have that level of game for the Sixers to win tonight, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think, in sincerity, that's a great point. I don't know that you can expect him to have 30 points in every playoff game, but he did have 38 there, and then he had 38 the very next night for the Sixers earlier this year, which was in his first month with the team when they were in Detroit. So let's hope he has more than 4. Let's root for that a little bit here tonight, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's certainly a school of thought that says give Jimmy Butler the ball and start. He likes pick and rolls. That Brett Brown put those in the Brooklyn series. That suits his game better. He is a ball handler who not necessarily is going to shoot it, but create for others. That's how he plays. And so, yeah, and so you might not see what we've seen with Ben Simmons running the offense. And I think, and Butler pointed this out too, and again, going back to those press conferences before each game, but, the Sixers offense, it's not Maurice Cheeks bringing it up and throwing it over to Tony. You know what I mean? Now it's one guy initiates it, and then it's off to the races. They whirl around the three-point arc. It's basically how every NBA team runs their offense at this stage. But I definitely think having Jimmy Butler have the ball a little bit more, because that's again, to use the phrase, that's a formula to win. And then to see Simmons driving that ball, there's been very few transition plays. But, yeah, I mean, I think you kind of go with that. I think you're going to expect more from Embiid, too. He had 16 points or whatever he had, obviously a little bit under the weather. He's got to solve the riddle of Gasol, or the Sixers aren't going far. You're right. I mean, you're going to need him. He doesn't have to get 27 a game because he can affect the game in a lot of ways. But, boy, you'd like to see him get more than 16, too, right?
Right, and I was going to ask you about Embiid. I mean, you're around him all the time. Does he just seem like, the other day, was he noticeably just not himself?
I thought so. When you hear that he had an IV before the game, they're not just handing those out, right, like oranges, right?
Right.
So he had to be, I think he was definitely under the weather, and he said so in a phrase or a term or, what we typically would not refer to as diarrhea or whatever. So obviously he was under the weather a little bit. They asked him yesterday as he was stepping in front of those microphones at practice here, and that was, are you feeling better? And he said a little bit. So, I mean, that tells you that he was less than 100% during that game. And now, as you say, 2 days later, rested up and raring to go, you got to hope that he's that all-star player that we've all seen over the last couple of years, 3 years. And so, yeah, I mean, but for Joel, and I thought this was an issue early in the game, illness maybe included, but make those decisions. He was a high turnover player again. If that's how they're playing, first of all, they're doing their early work as a big man. They're getting into his space. They're not letting him get to his sweet spots, like, for example, on that left block. And then, Gasol, he's not lightning quick, but he's very good with his footwork defensively, and that is he cuts off his space. So, like on the first play of the game, Joel had an open 18-footer. And, again, going back to the coach's comments, sometimes that first look in a playoff game is the best look. And if you're Embiid, I get that you want to drive and you want to get down there, but that's a pretty good shot for him. He's got some of the nicest, one of the nicest touches on the team. So that's what I think he needs to understand if that's there, bang, dribble, pull up, wing jumper, got it. Now they come out a little bit, and then he's able to possibly go into that back down bully ball mode. But just to kind of be poised and relaxed like he did on that call you just played, where he was, he commanded the double team, he handled the double team, he made a swing, cross court skip, 3-ball. That's winning basketball. That's making plays that put you in a position to win.
Tom McGinnis, you'll hear him tonight, 8 o'clock, 97.3 ESPN. Last thing I want to get from you, Tom, is the role of Monroe and Ennis, and then hopefully getting Mike Scott, and how that could potentially change this series. A lot of people said, yeah, Sixers have one of the best starting fives in the league, but the bench could be the issue. Now, we know the stars win typically, but it helps when you don't have that big drop-off. And in Game 1, the game was close. They went to the bench. A 2-point game went to 13, and the Sixers could never get back into it. So the Sixers bench has been a surprise. Can they keep it up? Because coming home, it's typically the home team's bench that gives you more.
Absolutely. Little editorial note here. I'm on the Ben Franklin Bridge. So if I'm dropping out, it's the steel structure that abounds. Wait, listen, here's what people don't see. Okay, so Mike Scott has had that plantar fasciitis in the heel. He had like one of those scooters, like a 3-wheeler thing with handlebars.
Doug Peterson was rolling around on.
Yeah, the little basket too. So it's 2 a.m, Philadelphia Airport. Mike Scott's wheeling around, and then I walk there to get my bags, and there's Greg. By like, okay. That's where we're at right now on Tuesday morning at 2 a.m. Mike practiced yesterday and got some work in. And I would think with those types of injuries, it's how you react the next day. And same thing with Greg. By his own admission, he was getting like round-the-clock treatment the last couple of days with that ankle. So he's definitely going to play. And I think, and you watched, Mike, but in those Brooklyn games, in that game, maybe Game 3 up there, he had, so many tips right at the rim, and you're like, make one already.
Yeah.
And he did in the Toronto series. That's how close, like, Greg Monroe had, like, rebounds, but they were all, like, those moments at the offensive end. So, against the Sixers in an earlier season game up there, and now he's on the Sixers. Isn't that crazy? So let's hope so. Like I said, the bench is still going to be key, whether it's Greg or Ennis or Mike Scott or whoever it turns out to be, and same thing for them. At some point, I think their reserves are going to play a role in this series.
Well, the Raptors have not won 3 straight road playoff games since 2001. They would need to do that with a win tonight. That would be 3 in a row. They won 2 in Orlando. They're in Philly tonight. So we'll see if they could do something they haven't done since 2001. And by the way, 2 days off, which I anticipate, Tom, the Sixers' level of defense to be like they were in that Nets Game 5, just smothering energy. The players have talked about it. That crowd tonight, I think the defensive level of intensity could be the difference. Early.
Well, is it okay to get my Toyota keys to the game in? Oh, wait, we're on the Honda show. My bad right there. No, but you're right. And one of them would be to get the crowd in the game and let them ride that energy, because that's right. Offensively, it gives you a little juice, but defensively, adrenaline and that crowd can really fire you up. Because defense, nervous energy is not a bad thing as long as you're using your noodle. And now it's going to be exciting. We all went through a lot as Sixers fans over the last few years. Nights like tonight are the payoff, and it's exciting. Win or lose, it's exciting to be in this position, and you root for the best, and let's hope the Sixers can pull it off here tonight.
All right, 8 o'clock, Tom McGinnis has the coverage right here on 97.3 ESPN. Game 3, Sixers and Raptors. Tom, we will be listening, and we certainly hope for a good call and a good game, man.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Tom McGinnis, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.